Jackson, good evening to you. Wow, that was quite the debate, wasn't it? How did the president go?
It certainly was. I think the president took an interesting approach, definitely different than Joe Biden. There was a lot of talking over each other, as I'm sure you've seen. Fox News anchor and moderator of the debate, Chris Wallace, had a hard time keeping a steady hand on all of this. He had to remind both candidates, not just Trump. They used the allotted 2 minutes to ensure that they got their points across. At one point, as you mentioned earlier, Vice President Biden said that Trump needed to shut up. He said, "Shut up, man." And I just looked at Twitter. A lot of people taking offense to that comment pretty heavily, it seems so far. So that's not good, obviously. But I don't really know, what was accomplished this evening, because there was a lot of arguing. Really, I just don't think this was enough to persuade that voter who's not entirely sure who to vote for at this point.
That's something I wanted to ask you about, Jackson, because obviously from our perspective in Australia, we're quite far back from it. But last Sunday, there was actually an influential paper here in Australia that released an editorial that said that there potentially is a silent majority, a groundswell movement similar to 2016, which will help the president secure the election in 2020. Now, of course, the polls in 2016, they were wrong. They do show Joe Biden ahead. From what you're seeing and from what you're hearing on the ground, what is the general consensus? What is the feeling going into the election? Who potentially will win? Do we feel that same 2016 energy again, or is it a different story?
I'm not entirely sure. I have talked to a lot of people. They have differing opinions, obviously, but I think that I think it's safe to say polls really just don't mean anything at this point. In 2016, all the polls showed Hillary winning, and as Megyn Kelly once said, she was a Fox News anchor, those predictions weren't worth the paper that they were printed on. And I think that could certainly be the case again this time. Obviously you want to believe and understand that these polls are going to be correct, but it's just proved time and time again that polls are not always accurate. And there is so-called the silent majority. And I've talked to a lot of Trump supporters specifically who often reference that silent majority. It's unknown at this point if that silent majority is going to show up on election day, but I think it's certainly very possible given the circumstances of what happened in 2016. And now we have Joe Biden, who we've already seen in office before, and now he's just trying to get another chance. So we'll just have to see what happens. But I do think that Trump supporters definitely didn't change their mind this evening. People know the president, they know how he acts, and I think if you support him, then you're okay with his actions, I guess.
It's funny, Sarah Palin, the 2012 Republican vice presidential candidate, once said that polls are only good for two things: cross-country skiers and strippers. So, there's a whole wide range feeling on polls. I wanted to ask you, there was this moment about an hour into the debate where Chris Wallace, the moderator, asked the president, would he denounce far-right radical groups, as well as Vice President to denounce these far-left radical groups. And the president said quite quickly to stand back and stand by, something along those words. Now, CNN, I was just watching them, and they said that is white supremacies. Obviously, that comment will be taken very differently depending on where you are in the political spectrum. But do you think that comment might stick to the president? That might have been maybe one of the downsides to the evening?
Well, I think that race is a big issue right now, certainly. And that comment specifically, I don't have a whole lot of information on now. I was watching the whole time, but I don't quite recall that specific time point. But I do know, speaking on the race issue, with the Black Lives Matter movement, among many other things, both candidates were asked if they agreed with those movements. I believe both of them said that they agreed Black Lives Matter. However, not entirely fully supporting the entire movements there and the breaking things in the streets, the rioting and things. But I did note one of the things that President Trump said about Biden was that he called African Americans, it was some sort of a derogatory term. It wasn't the common one, but they said that he wrote a policy or something. I don't know if you recall that, where he called African Americans like scary people, essentially, So it's unknown if that will hurt Biden with that comment from many years ago as well.
Well, a very interesting night, Jackson. Much appreciate your take live from South Carolina. Of course, we'll continue to see your coverage on 6 News every Sunday. Thank you so much for your time. Take care.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.